You know, the last time we talked, you mentioned that you started another business. I'm definitely curious about hearing that. But then I saw on your profile under YCombinator that you used to work as a systems engineer. And you did that for a long time. So, like, tell me about that. Like, what does a system engineer do? You were in the aerospace industry, if I read that correctly. Curious about that. How'd you start there? And
yeah, so I mean, I guess growing up, I'd always been interested in like space and robots and stuff. So I majored in mechanical engineering in college, and my first job was working in aerospace and defense. Did that for about 10 years, different companies, mostly working in satellites. So the systems that are responsible for doing navigation of the satellite, so figuring out where the satellite is pointing, where it's oriented, and then the actuators that would then correct the satellite's position to point it where it needed to be pointed. And so, I worked on a lot of the hardware for those underlying systems, like procuring it and getting it integrated in the spacecraft and stuff like that.
It seems fairly complicated, is it?
Yeah. I mean, it's on one hand, it can be like fairly complicated to understand all the different technologies, but on the other side, like the processing power in spacecraft is limited because of the radiation that the spacecrafts undergo. They can't have their, for lack of a better description, but they can't have like things too close together, because if they get hit by radiation, it messes up the processor. So you kind of had to deal with very like simplistic processing and stuff like that was like definitely a limitation to work within.
So if you were to compare it to like deploying a software application today with, like, let's say, for instance, a cloud provider, like the level of complexity, which one is? It sounds like the satellites would be a lot more, but just curious.
Yeah, I'd say they're more complex. They have a lot more limitations, and then you also have the problem of like you kind of only get one shot at the software. Like, so it needs to deploy in like a safe state, essentially, that you can make updates and stuff like that. And if you make an update that breaks the satellite or something like that, then there's no rebooting it or anything, right? If you can't communicate with it. So a lot of work went into like fault tolerance and dry running, like different things breaking and stuff like that. So
got it. So we could talk about all of those things. It's a little out of my depth because I'm not used to those, but it's definitely interesting. I'm actually really curious how you made the jump from doing that to then starting a business. Like were you always wanting to be an entrepreneur? Were your parents entrepreneurs, or like, where did that fall?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurship was something I was always interested in. I remember in high school I did some like summer camp entrepreneurship programs, really nerdy, at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And I mean, I think even throughout college, like I was always trying to come up with like business ideas with people. And, I think we did some like, idea pitches and things like that in college. But when I graduated, for some reason, I really wanted to like pursue the aerospace thing for a while. And then, I'd say after 10 years or so, I sort of decided I wanted to do something different. And I had a lot of friends doing software startups and it seemed to be pretty interesting. So, I kind of transitioned to doing software as a software dev for a few years to try to get a feel for how it worked. And then, with Chris, we kind of always worked on a few side projects, since we first met. And, eventually one of those turned into, or I guess a couple of those have turned into real businesses. So
thank you, Akamai, for sponsoring this podcast. Akamai's RISE program is calling for startups to apply for over $100,000 in compute credits to help your business scale and meet rising demands. Akamai Connected Cloud offers virtual machines, managed Kubernetes, firewalls, and object storage so you can build, scale, and continue to innovate. Sign up today at linode.com/rise.
Yeah.
When it comes to the aerospace, was it mostly the challenge? Like, because it sounds like you've had this history of entrepreneurial things. And for me, I went the direction of like, I'm just going to figure out how to start a business. I'm going to keep trying until I did that. Although I've had a lot of really good advice of like, oh, you should go work at something really challenging for a while, get some really good skills, and then go back to being an entrepreneur. Was that the case for you, or was it something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my problems is I'm just interested in too many things, so I kind of want to try everything. And it's really hard to like pick one or two things to focus on. So, yeah, and I think like, even though I was working on the hardware for satellites, like software was definitely part of it. I worked on some algorithms and things like that. Like a lot of the testing infrastructure for testing satellite is a lot of programming, things like that. So I was definitely doing all of that. It just like wasn't web technology focused until I decided to sort of make that change.
Yeah, makes sense. What was your first business? Like in high school or college? What was the first one? Do you remember?
I don't know. I've had a lot of really like bad ideas. Like I think. I think when I was younger, like I thought like I just needed an idea, like the right idea or the right invention. Like I remember trying to like talk to someone in college about like patenting an idea for a like rolling ladder that would make one of my buddies, his dad owned a construction business, and like one of the things that was always the problem was like hanging drywall on the ceiling. Like you always had to like move the ladder, get a couple guys up there, put it up, go back down the ladder, move over. And so you're like doing this all day. And so trying to come up with some sort of solution to that. And it's like, when we talk to like some of the people about patenting stuff, it's like, you kind of have to have like, some proof that this actually works. It's not just like coming up with an idea and then like you make $1 billion. So, I think my first forays were like a little bit naive. The other one I remember doing was one of my college buddies and I like came up with a new like an idea for like taking a traditional like game that like people would play and turning it into like a casino game. And so I remember submitting that to one of the big conglomerates that like licenses casino games. Yeah, I'd say those are my first initial forays. They didn't go anywhere, but I think they're helpful.
The latter one sounds like that's still an issue. Like, was that ever solved?
I don't know. I did look at it. I was thinking about this a few weeks ago. There's stilts. Stilts is one way. There's also just like the lift, the scissor lifts kind of option. I think anything where you're like doing construction and then you add wheels is probably like, it might be more convenient, but I think there's probably more safety implications. I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. I just came to mind. You get one of those tracks, like a tube track almost. Kind of. I think movies use them a lot, and you just use that to slide. I don't know. That's interesting. So, did you sell your game to a casino company then, or?
No. I mean, we heard back. We got like some feedback on it, but like ultimately they decided they didn't want to move forward with it or whatever. So yeah, it was interesting because it was like you're contacting people in the real world and going through the process of figuring out what they kind of look for. It was interesting. I have some friends who do not casino games, but like they do more board game stuff, and that's kind of interesting to me too, how that all works, like the licensing and getting games accepted and things like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you're fascinated. So you have this fascination with robotics as well as software and games. It's like, have you thought about mixing all those together to like help? I have young kids, so I think about this all the time, but help them learn how to code and some of the basics of electronics and all that. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, I definitely do look for solutions for my kids, but there definitely could be something better out there. I'd say probably given enough time, it would be probably something that I work on. Nice. But yeah, right now, just no time for that.
No time. Yeah. I got the nickname Popcorn Head in college from one of my professors, and it just stuck with me. And he said it as a way that was like, kind of like, hey, you got to pick something and do that. Not an endearing term, really. He was kind of making fun of me. But I take it now as like, this is one of my superpowers, like I love that I have so many ideas. Granted, I don't pursue all of them like yourself, but I think it's like one of the benefits that we need to keep honing, because those early ideas, you never know where they're going to lead. I think,
And I think it's also, I had to learn to say no as demands on my life have increased, like having kids and having a startup and stuff. It's like, oh, it'd be really cool to get into 3D VR stuff and play around with that. But at the end of the day, I don't know how much, if I have too many interests to try to work on too many things at the same time, then it's sort of nothing's going to get done on any of them. So
sure.
Trying to pick more of a focus has been useful. Yeah.
So the entrepreneurial thing, or go ahead.
I was going to say, and yeah, even when I had full-time jobs, I would frequently be doing contracting at night and on the weekends for, unrelated projects and things like that. And now it's now I'm my full energy is into loops and that's kind of my side project and my main project. So, yeah,
that's good.
It might be different aspects of the same project, but it's all, sort of under the same umbrella.
Keeping the main thing.
Yeah.
So the entrepreneurial bug, did that come from friends then? Like you said, your friend's dad had a construction company. Did you just see oh wow, you get to kind of control your destiny to some degree? Or was it more out of the, I like tinkering, I like building stuff and I want to continue doing that?
Yeah, I think just being the one who sets the, the goals and stuff and working on what I want to work on has sort of been something that I always wanted to do. And not really having a boss to answer to, has been really nice. And I think probably where some of it came from, I don't know. It was definitely in me at an early age. I think my dad probably really encouraged me to try to find a way to start my own business and not, work for someone forever. So, my brother owns a landscaping and asphalt business here in town, and he's done really well with that. So I think I think it's just something that kind of came up in childhood and something that I got interested in.
Yeah, makes sense. It's one of those things you just sort of get hooked in and you figure out a way. Hopefully, not everybody, but I think it's if you do it long enough, you're going to figure out a way. That's my opinion. Yeah. So what made you leave your steady job of being a systems engineer? What was the thing that just okay, now it's time to leave?
You mean to transition into doing software or when we, because it was I did 10 years in aerospace and then a few years of software development, working for our larger companies. And then we transitioned into doing, startup essentially. So.
Yeah, so you went from aerospace. What was the final thing where I'm done with this. I'm ready to move.
I think I worked on some really cool projects for the government, and but I think as you sort of advance in that environment, your work becomes more and more administrative and bureaucratic kind of. So the percent of time that I was working on really cool projects was decreasing, and the percentage of time that I was dealing with trying to get secure contractors to install a TV in the Pentagon was 6-month task that took forever. And the amount of time that I was spending on that was just a lot and was not super enjoyable to me. So I think at that point I was kind of well, do I want to keep doing this or do I want to try to move back into doing more, IC role, or, a lot of my friends, like I said, were doing software startups. So, it seemed very freeing to be able to I was working in a lot of very regulated spaces. So it's you couldn't, the computers weren't connected to any network. If you wanted software, you had to go through a whole approval cycle. There was no just downloading something and installing it. And, when I did some contract work for some friends, it was it was very freeing to just be able to use whatever the current new technologies were and, try new things out without having to go through any sort of processes or anything.
Yeah, that makes sense. 6 months to get a TV installed. That's a maddening situation.
Yeah. It was wild.
Yeah. So, what software do you work with now? I'm assuming it's mostly open source software, and I'm curious about the programming languages and the tools that you like working with now.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, use VS Code for
Yeah.
editing. Yeah, our tech stack is on Next.js, so we use that for both the front end and the back end. And then we have, some other JavaScript like workers and things like that serve some different functions within our app. But that's the majority of it. And then we use Supabase for the database under the hood, which is essentially Postgres.
Right. So do you use SST to deploy to AWS? Is that part of it?
No. We use Vercel. So
oh, you do? Okay.
Vercel, is technically AWS under the hood, but their own AWS account. And we looked into potentially switching to something that deploys on our own infrastructure, but for right now we've been using Vercel and generally been happy with it. So.
Oh, that's great. So this, of course, is for Loops. You got to tell me about Loops. What's your pitch for Loops?
Yeah, so Loops is simple email sending for SaaS businesses. I think throughout all the projects Chris and I have worked on and the companies we worked at, we've used a number of different competitors in the space, and just nothing like sort of was enjoyable to use. Kind of like I don't know if you ever use Linear or Jira, but it's like what Linear is compared to Jira, we're hoping to be compared to like MailChimp or SendGrid. Just want it to be like a really like intuitive experience, like a lot of enjoyable to use, not something that you're like fearing using. We want people to be able to get in, create their campaigns, their emails, their flows for their users, and then be able to go back to what they're doing. And like we just handle everything else on our side that we can for you. I think one of the cool value propositions, we're not quite there yet, but we're working towards, is just like being able to share consistent branding and formatting across all of your emails for your brand, whether they're transactional or feature releases or like part of the user journey, like onboarding sequence, things like that. A lot of companies use like different tools for each of these purposes, and I think there's a lot of value of just having them all under the same umbrella. Like when I was working at Datadog, there was a change to the brand colors that happened, and it hadn't been updated in the transactional emails in like a year since the brand colors had changed. So I remember like wanting to change it, and then I had to find the place in the source code where that color was set, because all the emails lived in the code base, and then had to find the team that was responsible for that, and that code hadn't been deployed in like 6 years or whatever it was. Wow. And so like figuring out the deploy process for like that particular part of the code and like testing and all that stuff. And it was just like all this just to change like, some hex value seemed a little onerous. I think frequently, like when we talk to people that are doing transactional emails, like frequently they get set up and then they never get edited again or updated. And the marketing team doesn't have very much control over the branding that are in those emails. And I think, everywhere that you communicate with your customer, you want to be like very consistent and intentional about how your brand is coming off. So, being able to make easy edits to that with the marketing team without having to loop an engineer in, I think is a big benefit.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it in that way before, of having the marketing team being able to edit the transactional emails. I know for a lot of my projects, it's like I mostly, especially for newer ones, it's like a copy and paste sort of thing of like you just change a few values and it's basically the same. So it's not really branded in the way that it probably could or should. And so you're coming in and making that seamless and useful.
And having consistent branding like has other benefits as far as like deliverability and things like that. Like transactional messages are probably going to get opened and interacted with, and like that's an opportunity for you to, you don't want to be like salesy in your transactional emails, but at least like be consistent with your brand and like the tone of voice and things like that. I think there's a lot of things that brands don't typically do very well there. Yeah.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think that it's been so hard to make transactional emails and marketing emails be consistent?
I think a lot of it is just like, the developers don't like, in the majority, enjoy coding emails because it's like a lot of the code and things you have to do is like very archaic. It hasn't like email code hasn't like really moved along, like web code has. And so there's a lot of hacks you have to do to get things to render the right way, and it's just a real pain in the butt, especially like across all the different clients that exist, and like dark mode and like keeping things consistent is just like, you could think that you've coded a good email, but it might show up poorly on Windows Outlook or something like that, and you'd have no idea unless you specifically tested it or customer complains. So we're trying to abstract all that testing away. Like we test sort of like the base components that we send in the emails. I think it makes it a lot easier to craft your emails. So I think generally like a lot of the things that marketing teams want to do, like maybe add a logo or like, let's make this 2 columns and do this. Like it might be difficult to do well in an email. So like, I think the developers are like more like just write the email that has the invite code or the password reset link and just ship it and just be done. I think that's probably why there's not a lot of like customization that goes into those.
Makes sense. Cool. We cut out there a little bit. Not sure why, but I think I got it.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. So as far as like actually going and being like, okay, Loops is the business, what made you pull the trigger there? Since you have so many ideas, so many things that you might want to pursue, what was it about Loops and emails that you're like, oh, I'm going to enter a space that's fairly competitive? I mean, there's a lot of email offerings out there. Mm-hmm. How'd you make that leap?
Yeah, I still have some of the texts, like when Chris and I were discussing applying to YC. We had a few different ideas. I think, there were some thoughts about like maybe we should do something in Web3 around like, being able to, I forget the exact idea, but like basically taking more traditional like business things and validating them on a blockchain. And we also talked about some carbon capture stuff, not necessarily like doing it, but like the actual like licensing and like metrics around it. And then I think we sort of settled on email as the idea because, MailChimp had just had a really big exit. And we thought like the MailChimp platform is, kind of like, we thought we could make something that was, more enjoyable to use than that. And it just seemed like a consistent thing that had come up for us across a bunch of different businesses, no matter like what the idea was. Like any online platform needs to send email. So being able to, serve like just a ton of users was like really appealing to us.
Yeah, it seems every project needs email, and it seems like if you have to make a pick, you got to pick transactional and marketing. It makes sense to have them both in one place. Absolutely. So, but it still feels very competitive. I'm really excited to see where you guys go. Happy customer over here too. And Loops, I mean, I think the value proposition from a developer's perspective, I'm like, oh, this is great. But I'm also an entrepreneur. So it's like both of those things. I'm like, it just made a lot of sense to me. And also, MailChimp's a mature product, it feels like. It doesn't seem like they're trying to make major improvements. They might bring generative AI in, but to me, that's not a major improvement. That's a small feature that everyone can do. Just open up a variety of services to make that happen. And so, like, I looked at something like MailChimp has a lot of really good mature features, but it doesn't seem like they're pushing the envelope where they maybe once were. So to me, it does make sense to be able to compete against them. But there are other ones out there that I'm curious, like, how is it, like, is this more, are you trying to solve the transactional thing more than the marketing thing, or are you trying to do both of them at the same time? And like, how do you compete against some of these that have a 10-year head start on you with startups? Like there's other ones that are not MailChimp,
Yeah. I don't know. It's interesting. Like when we were in YC, a lot of companies like pivot their ideas and basically what we did was we launched basically kind of a simple email sending feature where you could like email a list of people. because that was like the easiest thing to build. And yeah, I mean, the feedback was generally like very positive. Like a lot of people were refreshed at how like simple it was and straightforward to use. I think a lot of our user interviews were like, people just disliked their current email tool for a variety of reasons, and the question was, so I think there's like something there, and then the question is like, can we build something that sort of solves for this and becomes something that is delightful to use? So yeah, it's sorry, my notifications are forgot to mute in these.
Oh yeah, no worries. Was that with Y Combinator companies? Like, were they your first early tests, or was it with other companies?
Yeah, so I'd say the majority of like very early users were YC companies. So like that's one of the benefits of YC is like, especially if you're building a B2B SaaS, like there are other B2B companies that are willing to try your products for you. I think then and people that have been in YC for a while sort of know that like maybe they're getting a less polished solution initially at least, but they'll have a lot of input on the final version of the product. So a lot of those YC companies have sort of been with us since the beginning and have guided the product development cycle, and so they've been able to like see features that they specifically wanted added to the product, which has been nice for them. Obviously we're a lot more accessible, right, than finding someone in MailChimp to write back. Like, you're going to get the actual team that's building it, like responding to all the support tickets. So, we're able to use that sort of guide product development and stuff like that.
Yeah, that nimble thing that startups can do, or every company should do this. Like, I mean, we jumped on a Slack channel and just started chatting there. I've chatted with Chris a number of times. I think like some of the biggest companies, it's surprising to me that a lot of them won't do stuff like that because they probably can gain so many insights, which I'm sure you're constantly getting, right? Like, that type of one-to-one customer touch. So with the YC companies, is there like a directory you can just reach out to it, or is it people that you have cohorts? I'm not familiar with that process.
Yeah, there's a few different ways. I mean, within our batch, right, there's like a Slack channel, and you can kind of announce to everyone that you're launching something and get people to like try it out, or you can even just say like, we want to build something in this space and we'd like to interview people and see what what they like or don't like about their current solutions. And then there's like the more like direct route is, we do have a directory, and you can like find, you can email the founders of other YC companies if you think you'd be a good fit. Trying to like sort of cold email your way in, but I think generally Chris and I like don't really enjoy receiving cold emails, so we try not to send too many. I don't think many of our customers or any, we haven't done any like real cold email or outbound campaigns like that. I mean, most of it's been just sort of a snowball effect of like getting a few people in, and then let them telling other people, and so far that's been going really well. We also have the benefit of like for our free tier, we have the footer in the bottom that's like powered by Loops, and so these customers of ours probably have customers that are looking to send email also, just so ubiquitous, and so we've gotten people in through that way as well, which is kind of a tried and true method for email marketing companies to grow.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. So when you pitched Y Combinator to join, did you do it for Loops?
Yeah. It was Chris and I just sold our previous project to Unbounce, and yeah, we were looking to start something new. It was sort of like the day of the deadline that we were like, hey, should we apply? And we kind of went through those ideas I mentioned earlier, and figured out which one we thought would be kind of the best fit for YC, and applied with that. And yeah, I mean, like I said, some companies, or a lot of companies, tend to pivot in YC. We're still building essentially the same idea we had that day. So that's been a little unique in some ways, where it's like sometimes we're like, maybe we should have pivoted more, and in other ways it's like we see all these we see other people like kind of spinning their wheels and trying different ideas and things like that, and it seems like we've really struck on something, and our customer growth has been pretty good.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you had the idea for loops the same day, or you've been kind of thinking of different ideas, but you had the same day that Y Combinator was due. You just decided then that's when you're going to do loops?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Chris and I both have had considered felt the pain of this problem over time, but we'd never like decided that we were going to work on this project or this problem until the actual application deadline. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. That's what might end up being what loops turns into. Mm-hmm. I'm rooting for you, but Y Combinator's deadline might be responsible. How many companies do you think it's responsible for? Just the deadline. I realize Y Combinator itself attracts a lot of companies, but I wonder how many people have done the same thing.
I don't know as far as the idea. I know like I can't think of the names, but like on Twitter recently there was like a lot of posts about like, we decided to apply to YC like the last day or the day after applications are due and things like that. And, look where we are now sort of thing. So yeah, I think definitely like the deadline is a good forcing function and probably has caused a lot of companies to be formed. As far as like the idea being the exact same one, I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys knew, you and Chris knew that, we have the technical capability to build this thing. We're going to apply. If we get in, then we'll start building it. If you didn't get in, would you still have done loops or would you be working on something else, you think?
That's a good question. I think probably we'd be doing something. I think we had also talked about like, why don't we just try to go out and raise VC money for an idea. But I think applying to YC was sort of the first version of that. And probably if that hadn't worked out, we might have, honed the idea a little bit more and maybe gone out and pitched it to different VCs directly and gone from there.
Interesting. So what it feels like to me is it's like you and Chris are a good team and you guys are like, okay, we're going to do something. The idea was just like, it has to be a good idea. It has to be something that makes sense. But the idea was like secondary to the two of you working together. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. We had some criteria for the idea or like desired features, I guess, the idea, like our previous project was a Snazzy AI, which was a marketing copy generator powered by GPT-3. It's a cool product. I think one of the things that was something we didn't like about it was like it's not a super sticky product, right? Especially with all these competitors coming in that space. If you're using Snazzy AI to generate your Google Ads headlines, for example, it's not hard for you to switch to a different tool to do that. If like they offer a different feature or a new feature that you like. With email, it's like inherently sticky because you have to set up your domain records, get all your email sending correctly. You have to integrate with our API to keep all your contact properties synced with us and like events that might trigger automatic sequences for emails, things like that. So once you've got all that set up, generally it's like you're only going to transition to another product if there's like something egregious that you don't like or something maybe that happened with support that you didn't like. I'd say overwhelming majority of our churn is just like companies shutting their businesses down or pivoting or, hey, we decided we're not ready to like spend money on email right now. We're going to come back to this later. So yeah, I think that's been like really rewarding. And I think like the free tier also helps with that, right? Because people aren't going to start paying us until they've like actually tried the product out. So, right. We're not getting a lot of like churn from people just trying it out essentially. So.
Yeah, the interesting thing is how critical email is, but how challenging it is to switch. Even personally, like my personal email, I still have the same one I've had for 15 years or longer. I don't even know. It's really hard to change.
And then the other, sorry.
I mean that's like super compelling. That with a lot of startups, I feel like that's like might be a big part of your bread and butter. Is like just cozying up with all the Y Combinator companies as soon as the new batch comes in. I don't know if there's a way to do that, but me myself, I'm like, oh, I've got all these ideas. I've been hoping at some point Loops will have the ability to just have multiple accounts and you just switch between them. I'm sure that'll come at some point, because it makes sense that like startups will just join in and then they'll be sucked into this ecosystem, where Snazzy or any sort of generative AI tool, I feel like has just only a certain runway. It's almost like a text editor until one of the biggest players comes out. I mean, it might just continue to be ChatGPT. We'll see. But I think you could also benefit a lot from a lot of those generative tools, but they don't have to be the main selling point of your product, right? Like, I mean, it's just a small piece of it. It's just a feature. It's not the main benefit, right? So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, the other feature we were looking for in terms of an idea was just like the ability to like grow with companies, kind of like you mentioned. Like if we get in early with YC startups, and then they continue to add as they get more successful, they're adding more subscribers to their email lists, and and since we charge based on like contacts or email volume, we're able to like charge them more as time goes on. Whereas it's like really hard as a startup, like if we were early on and someone's like, I've got 6 million contacts and I want to upload them to Loops and send email, like it's going to be pretty difficult for us to scale instantly like that. So the ability to like we were able to start with like companies that are like, hey, I have like 10 investors that I want to email. Like that's pretty easy for us when we don't have anything yet. Yeah. And then, we're able to build a product around, growing that list and importing lists and things like that. And so now, I think some of our larger customers are definitely in the millions of contacts now. The other obvious benefit of that is like the revenue goes up as the customer gets more successful. So, we want to move towards tying your revenue more directly back to your customers. So like, imagine a world where you sync your Stripe account with Loops, and maybe like we are able to like automatically determine that, you sent X customers this email about a new feature released, and as a result of that email, like, this Y number of customers converted to paying from free or whatever your business model is. And so that's sort of, if we can like directly say like, using as a result of using Loops, we've increased your revenue by X. I think that's like a very compelling story for why we charge you money to use Loops. So I think having that direct feedback will be really cool once we get it.
Oh yeah, that sounds great, because you might be able to tie back the actions. Remind me again the name of it, but it's like the workflows that get triggered. Is
They're called Loops? Yeah.
I thought so. So there's Loops also has these workflows that when they get triggered, a bunch of different actions can happen as far as emails are sent, right? But yep. I would imagine at some point, not too dissimilar from Zapier, you could have other like webhooks or API calls in there in those actions. So in many ways, you could also then not just do the value of just using Loops, but also a specific loop or maybe even a specific email. Like this particular email ended up earning you an extra $10 a customer or whatever the number ends up being. That's going to be very compelling and fascinating to see. Yeah. I wonder how many schools are using Loops for. Like Coding for Entrepreneurs, we use it. I wonder what other schools are out there using Loops.
I don't know about schools specifically. I know that we have some because it's come up. Like people want to send like events based on different courses and reminders based on when courses start and things like that. There's definitely some that have used it, and I always like try to spend a little time talking to them too, because like I used to work at Code Academy, which is like one of the biggest, or was at one time one of the biggest online schools for learning how to program. So I think that's definitely a big use case, that sending sending course updates and things like that would be like a great use of loops.
Yeah. Like, but I was thinking going along the lines of like the value amount of like this particular email ended up being worth X.
Right.
Almost like the inverse of somebody throwing out this plug-in idea of how much a meeting costs. Like whenever you schedule a meeting with your team, like it assigns the number value on there. But similar to that, but specifically what this email might end up doing. That's pretty interesting. Have you?
And I mean, you could even get predictive with it, right? You could try to say like, we think if you do X, Y, and Z to this email, it's going to be more effective and you'll generate more revenue. And then we can actually like measure that. Would be really cool.
Yeah. Do you think there's going to be a world where it's going to be beyond email, where it's other kinds of notifications? So like SMS, of course, that's a logical one, but even like basically allowing the end user to pick where they want to get the notification through some sort of API. Maybe it's a Slack message, but it's on behalf of your customers, like being part of loops. Do you think that's going to happen?
Yeah. So, I mean, one benefit of like we're serving our ideal customers, like a B2B software company. I'd say like the majority of things happen over email still. So we're able to like really focus on email. That said, like people have asked for SMS. I'd say from looking at SMS, it just seems like just like a whole other world of getting your short codes for phones and things like that, and like complying with regulations across the world as far as like texting people and opt out and all that. And it just seems like sort of a giant, giant problem to go and solve. So we haven't offered that yet. I'd say the Slack piece is kind of interesting. We use Slack Connect to connect with all of our customers if they want a Connect channel to do support. And yeah, it'd be really cool to be able to maybe have a Slack message that goes out, announcing like a new feature release or something to all of our channels, in addition to the email or instead of the email, depending on preferences. So yeah, I think something there would probably be more likely to happen than SMS for us right now. Just based on like the exact demo that we're serving.
Yeah, and going back to the webhooks thing, if in the loops there are webhooks, you could just build out the SMS from there using some of the tools that are out there, like as the development team, and have it being still pretty consistent. It's doesn't, and then once you see that working a lot, then maybe it's a feature that you'll want. But it sounds like to me, and this is what I've been hearing, and this is my experience too, is you guys are just really building things that your customers need and want, and you just stick with that. Like, how often are you asking customers what they need, and how often are you doing these like user interviews to build the next few features?
I mean, honestly, just in support, like people are asking for like, hey, how do I do X? And if we don't have a good answer for that, then that's, something we may consider building. And yeah, it's like, it's always like a difficulty versus, how important is the customer and the revenue they bring versus like how hard it'd be to implement. Like, there's features where someone like, they might be a free user, but they ask for, why can't I see X? It's like, oh, we have that data. We'll just pipe that to the front end. So like, we'll build that. But then there's, there's more complex features that people have been asking for that maybe are features that we know we need to build eventually. And usually we'll just like, we set up like a custom integration with Linear where it'll basically notify us if we have solved like a ticket that affected, several users, and then we'll go out and reconnect with those users and be like, hey, we have that feature now. And so that's like a really good feedback cycle for them. And also like another chance to engage and show that we're like, we're building what they want.
Interesting. So Linear is how you do that.
Yeah, we have like a custom little script that like listens to Linear events, and basically if there were any customers listed on the ticket, it'll like send us links to those like initial chats where those customers asked for those questions, whether it was an email or in Slack or whatever, and then we'll basically like reconnect on those channels and go back. So usually more effective when it's been like a month or so, but like there's definitely some now where it's like, hey, you asked for this feature 16 months ago and now we have it. So it's like, yeah, well, we moved on and picked a different solution or something. So but it's also like a chance to re-engage. Like some of those are like, oh, I'll check it out again. Right. So it's a chance to get people back on the platform after it's been kind of a little while since they looked at it. So
yeah, that's interesting. So how about like just technically speaking, Shopify integrations or WordPress integrations? Is there going to be like, are you going to build Loops as a native solution for those tools where they're basically plugins for them so that the communication, like the actual customer support communication, all that could actually come through a loop? Or is that just like outside the context of something you're trying to solve right now?
Yeah, I think specifically talking to like Shopify, like e-commerce is like kind of a different world because you're emailing, it's more B2C email and the volume's like a lot higher and the emails are usually stylized more. So we're not really focusing on that as much. That said, like integrations are like a big focus for us. So I think our first one was with Zapier. So being able to use that to send your contacts into loops. We also like with the SaaS focus, like Segment has been a huge one for us. So like being able to pipe all of your Segment data into loops as far as like, whether contacts were created, updated, and like, any events they took to be able to send emails on like as a trigger has been good. And then we also have an integration with a platform called Census, which is like kind of they like aggregate all your data from your platform and then you can like pipe it back out in bulk. So that's been a good way for us to get users in. And then, yeah, like we're starting to work on integrations with some of our like sort of the no code tools. So like we recently released like a make.com integration, which used to be Integromat. And then we're taking a look at like bubble.io and a couple others. Just, again, these are mostly driven by existing users of the tools asking for like, how do I use loops on this? A lot of the tools provide ways to just basically call an arbitrary API. And so like that's a good way to get your integration working initially. And then once someone tries it out and likes it or whatever, you can basically like kind of codify that into like an official integration usually with these platforms. And so that's been a pretty useful way. And then, that kind of snowballs into discoverability and things like that. Cause like you might go into the, Segment integrations and search for email and then loops will be listed there. And so it builds brand awareness and also helps people discover like other services that might be out there that might serve their needs.
Yeah, that makes sense. So with Zapier, for example, if you wanted to send email with Zapier, would it be able to be done using loops? I mean, I suppose you just do an API call at the end of a Zap. Is that kind of how you think about it, or?
Yeah. The Zap basically calls our public API, so it's just like kind of packaged a little bit nicer than using raw code or whatever. So yeah, you can do anything. You could like do anything you can do through our normal APIs through Zapier integration.
Oh, cool! That's great. So yeah, I'm curious how you met Chris. Like, how did that come about? And because I know there's a lot of on both sides, like the technical people looking for a co-founder to start a business. And then there's the non-technical people looking for a technical co-founder to start a business. So how did you guys meet? How did you end up starting to work together?
Yeah. When I transitioned from aerospace, my first job was at CuriosityStream, which was a streaming company, kind of like Netflix, but focused on nonfiction by the founder of Discovery Channel. And yeah, I kind of did a little bit of everything there because I was, still learning what the technologies were. Chris started there on the content side. And he moved into doing more marketing and design, type stuff. And then, yeah, I mean, the whole company was pretty small, so we knew each other pretty well and kind of knew he was into like, Hacker News and coming up with startup ideas and things like that. And, yeah, I mean, that's how we met. We had a few ideas that we worked on over time. And yeah, eventually blossomed into loops, I guess, is the current iteration. So.
Got it. So you just working together, and then that's what turned into this business relationship, starting businesses.
Yep.
That's cool. So is there an opportunity? So if Loops, let's say for instance, Loops was gone tomorrow, is there something you and Chris were like, yeah, we should do that right now?
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. We haven't talked about any specific ideas that we think we should be pursuing outside of Loops, but yeah, I don't know. It's I think a lot of the hype right now is in the generative AI space. I don't know if we would do something there. I think as we were working on Snazzy, which used GPT-3, there's definitely room for a lot of tools under the hood that scripts and things that we were using to build Snazzy that maybe would have been useful as a kind of building the shovels for building these applications. So I think some of the stuff that Vellum.ai is doing is really interesting as far as the tooling around how do you version prompts that you're using for things, and how do you gauge whether it's a good prompt or better or worse and things like that. So I think a lot of that's interesting. I don't know if that's what we would work on or not, but yeah, hopefully Loops is not gone tomorrow. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't think it will be. Vellum.ai, I haven't seen that one. I'm gonna have to check it out. That's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I think what's the biggest challenge that Loops faces right now, technically speaking? I mean, I know Vercel's very reliable, so having that part figured out is really nice. But is there anything else that's technical that you're like, oh, I wish we could solve that right now, but it's just taking a lot longer than you would like?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I'd say a lot of the problems that we've encountered are just email related, just getting emails to render properly across different clients is a whole ball of wax, especially I mentioned with dark mode, light mode, and there's new clients that people complain about not things not rendering properly. They're not good testing doesn't exist for. So it's really hard to replicate some of the issues. So that's
how do you?
That's been really. I mean, mostly it's there are tools so we use Litmus, and there's also email on Acid, where basically you send a single email to an inbox and then it renders it on 20 different clients or something like that. But those typically don't support a lot of the newer clients, even Superhuman's not supported. So yeah, it's just manually sending stuff to a Superhuman account that you have control over, and changing the settings to be the light mode, dark mode, and take a look and see if things are rendering the way you want them to or not. Yeah, and I think a lot of that is people, especially people that are coding emails, are unaware of, and until they get a support support request from a customer that something didn't render properly. I think there's a lot of benefit for us to be handling that for you. If someone complains about something not rendering properly in dark mode on Superhuman, for example, we will fix it for not just that person that complained, but every client. And so there's sort of the multiplicative benefit to our users to kind of rely on us for all the email rendering handling. So versus you trying to handle it on your own.
That's really interesting. That compare and contrast that people aren't aware of is something that I think would be a really good thing to see inside of Loops. So when I'm first starting out, I didn't even think about this, but SendGrid, for example, or let's just say any transactional email service, you send an email out, you just sort of assume it's going to work fine. But with you saying all these things, I'm oh, I probably should have tested all the different clients and how it looks and stuff like that. So a lot of times I just end up defaulting to plain text. Again, assuming that that's going to work great for a transactional email. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I haven't had the tangible proof because customers haven't mentioned it to me. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening, right?
Yeah, and I mean, I do think plain text emails, especially for business, can be very effective. And yeah, the rendering, you don't need to worry about as much. But but the minute you start like tinkering with font size and colors and background colors and things like that, some platforms try to do some automatic things to make things look generally better. But there are cases where they end up making things look worse, and so you have to override certain things, and it gets very complex very quickly. So
For
like
sure.
I think Sticker Mule, I don't know if you're on their email list, but I think they do email marketing very well. It's very like straight to the point. It's plain text, a link or two here or there. I don't have access to it, but I'm assuming that they're open and delivery rates are probably very high, versus someone who has like a very long email with lots of images and links to various services and things like that. I think probably generally don't perform as well.
Yeah. Oh, and you mentioned Sticker Meal, so I go to e-commerce and I'm like, oh, the other thing that's interesting to think about with Shopify is they send emails for shipping notifications, for example, and the marketing team might never have any touch points on those notifications, and therefore can't make a unique experience to that brand. Just something else to think about. I suppose you might be able to use, with Loops right now, you could probably use Zapier to do a lot of the notification handling, and then use Loops just through Zapier and do it that way.
Yeah.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. Interesting. So is there any big releases coming out with Loops in the near future?
Yesterday we released user activity sort of stream. So like you've probably seen this in other competitors, but something we hadn't released yet is just like being able to click on an email address and see all the times they were contacted through Loops, and like what are events they fired, things like that. So you'll be able to click into contacts now and see their sort of journey throughout the platform. Like, they requested a sign up email, and then they got the the welcome email, and then maybe they requested a password reset, and you'll be able to see all that in a single view. So that's pretty cool. We just hired someone to work on our editor primarily full time. So I think like we've gotten a lot of like really positive feedback around our editor. I think it's surprisingly like one of our value props is just like we don't use the same editor that everyone else does. If you've used other tools, you'll notice like their drag and drop interface, the way that you build emails is all the same. It's because they're licensing a tool called Be Free or Be Pro under the hood to generate the emails. And it's a quick way to sort of like not worry about the email building process and like rendering and all that, because like they handle all that for you, but you sort of also tie your features directly to that product. So I think we have plans to make the editor a lot more interactive and like give you suggestions of how to do different things, or like maybe you should change this copy because we've noticed like this word will trigger spam filters and things like that. So we're not all the way there yet, but I think there'll be some fun features coming in the editor. And I also think just like there are a few bugs here and there in the editor, and I think those will be tightened up a lot over the next month or so.
Oh, great. Do you think there will be a native editor? Like, will I be able to, or a plug-in for VS Code where I can have the editor directly in a lot of the tools I use?
I don't know. That would be cool. We've talked a little bit about like would it make sense to open source it and things like that. So yeah, we don't have any good answers there yet, but yeah, I think there could be that could be interesting, like doing something like that, providing access elsewhere.
My thought is for version control, a big part of that as well, but also just having sort of that native experience that you can basically keep the editor open all the time, and just when you get a good idea, you just build it out right there. I suppose. Yeah,
we've also talked about like because people like give us a lot of praise on the editor experience compared to others, like basically just providing like a playground where people can try it out without having to create an account is something we've also discussed in the past. So yeah. Oh,
that's a great idea. I'm thinking in terms of any software developer for their transactional email, you could just use the editor to allow them to create their email. I'm not sure how this would work specifically, but you could let them use the editor. and put it in their current tool, whatever it is. Not that you necessarily want them to still use their current tool, but if they're using your editor for crafting all their transactional emails, it's only going to be a matter of time before everyone else in the team might use it. But my thought is if you can't move your transactional emails over yet, but you want the ability to write transactional emails and then have them work on all of these different platforms, it's like, I don't know, it feels like a good entry point into that.
Yeah, we've also, something we sort of say is like, we don't want you coding the emails. Like we don't, like kind of let us take care of that. But people have existing solutions where they have, emails in their code base, and they just want to hook it up to Loops and start that way. So, we've definitely talked about like, would it make sense to offer just like a raw HTML delivery, for emails and what that would entail. But yeah, like we've thought about maybe doing that, and then you could do something where like the HTML email comes into you, and then we could detect like, this is your password reset email, and then we could categorize it, and we could like maybe generate a version of that exists inside Loops and say, okay, like you're doing it this way now, but like if you want to like the full Loops experience, you can click to open this in your editor and then make modifications to it. And maybe that's a good way to like onboard people into the editor experience.
Yeah, or the other thing being that they can just bring their user account from that other transactional service, and then Loops actually sends their specific account's transaction through that other transactional service as a temporary measure until they fully convert. I don't know. I'm just coming up with ideas. Maybe they're good. They're probably not. You've probably thought about these a lot.
I mean, they're definitely things we're thinking about. It's there's only 7 of us now, so trying to figure out like what things to focus on and what things are going to have the highest impact. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, congrats on reaching to 7 people. That's exciting. Adam, I know our time's limited, so thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. This was good chatting with you. I can't wait to have a follow-up conversation in a year or something like that, so we can see where Loops has gone. Definitely rooting for you guys and happy customer. So thanks again for being on. It's good chatting with you.
Cool. Yeah, I appreciate you taking the time. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.